Hello everybody, this is Scott from certmedia.com, and today I'm going to be doing another video that's in line with my how RE CAPTCHA is killing your website performance. And today I'd like it to cover how Google Maps are killing your website performance. And while this is a series in itself, it's supposed to get you to think about the impact of some services on your website's performance. So to get a fair baseline, this website is hosted on Siteground. It's a shared hosting plan. It's using the Genesis Revolution Pro theme with demo content imported. And then I added the default plugins that it recommended: Atomic Blocks, Genesis e-News Extended, and the simple social icons. Any other plugins were removed, deleted, and only the default demo content is on here. So to begin, I wanted to illustrate where the website was before we began. And then I wanted to show you the impacts of it afterwards. And we're going to be doing this as we go. I chose a random Google map that I'm going to embed on the home page. And this is an unoptimized stack. This is imported as it was from the demo to get the most real world measurement. The website scores a 65 and an 83 with a 1.2 second fully loaded time, 1 megabyte page size, and 38 requests. Pingdom gets a 38, 1.1 page size, 701 milliseconds, and PageSpeed Insight scores at a 67 and a 90. All of these numbers could be higher if the website was optimized, but I wanted to get a roundabout figure for the impact of the service. Now that we've gotten our baseline, I want to go ahead and embed this Google map of the Music City Center in downtown Nashville. To do this, I could do it one of a handful of ways, but because this is using Gutenberg, I'm just going to add it right above here where it says the latest work, and then there's this spacer. I'm going to do a custom HTML widget, and I'm just going to paste the code right in there. And then I'm not caring about the aesthetics of the item, but it looks like the Google map is loaded. You can click it, you can get directions, all that jazz. It works. And the good thing about this implementation is that since it's an iframe, you can in theory lazy load it. If you use a JavaScript implementation, all the required assets are going to be loaded regardless of the item in viewport or not. There's really no option for you with that case. Now what we're going to do is we're going to run the test again on all three testing tools. Then we're going to take a step back and analyze them. And then we're going to look at what can be done to minimize the impact of the service on your website's performance. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that all these tests have their own means of measuring. And the Pingdom one is going to be slightly messed up because I closed out of that test. But the point will remain because it was about a 700 millisecond load time with a 1.1 megabyte page size. Okay, so now let's take a step back and analyze. We started at a 1.2 second fully loaded time, the 1.1 megabyte page size, and 38 requests. By adding the one map, we increased our page size by about 50%, and our request count increased by about 24 additional requests, which is a little over 50%. So what we can see here is that the immediate effect of adding the map is that it loaded a fair amount of megabytes of data and created a lot of requests. And the one thing you need to keep in mind is that since this is an embed, it's a non-complicated map. When you use the JavaScript API, it can generate a lot more requests. And Pingdom, the score says that the page size increased from 1.1 megabytes to 1.7. The load time is about the same because Pingdom measures by the onload event time. And then this takes us to the page speed insights score. We started out as 67 on mobile. This took us down to a 48, so we effectively lost about 20 points by adding one iframe embed of a Google map. And you could tell because it's the suggested issue under the diagnostic information to reduce the impact of third-party code. Both of these being tied to the Google map because they block the main thread. Now, for desktop users, it's a 92, and it was started as a 90. The text will fluctuate, so don't think adding Google Maps will increase your performance by any means. That's just not going to happen. But what we can see is that unilaterally across the board, the page size went up substantially in this case. The request count went up fairly substantially. And the impact on mobile performance was fairly large. Going from their 67 to a 48 is really just a measurement of this lab data. When PageSpeed Insights calculates your score, it doesn't do it based on your opportunities. It does it based on the lab data right here for each of the measurement points that it takes for the website. So the obvious things like the paint times aren't going to be increasing because the iframe embed is not going to stop the rendering of the above the fold content because all the CSS is already above it. But the speed index score, which is just a general score that they show to illustrate how quickly content on the page loads up, went up by about 1.1 seconds. And that's because the Google Map has to go and fetch all of its requests and download them and then serve them to the user. And most of that stuff is JavaScript. JavaScript's always going to be the major hindrance for mobile performance because it eats up the CPU. Our first CPU idle time went from 3.4 to 5.7 seconds. That's effectively a 50% increase, meaning the CPU doesn't have any resting period for an additional 2.3 seconds. This, of course, increases the time to interactive because there's more JavaScript being loaded and there's more processing needing to be done by the device to render that map. And then there's the max potential first input delay, which is going to be how long until the users can tap and interact with the actual content. And they measured it as to be about 190 milliseconds, and it was originally 130. So if you're a web developer or a web designer, and you're in this situation where your client requires, or maybe you're the client, and you would need to have a Google map, what can you do? Well, for starters, avoid using the Google Maps JavaScript API. Couple reasons. If you're using any kind of cache plugin that I've made videos about in the past, for instance, they don't handle third-party JavaScript in a very unique manner. Most of the time it's combined and served as a local JS file with the rest of it, which is totally fine. It allows it to be cached. It allows it to be served from Brotli compression as opposed to gzip. It allows all kinds of things. But the Google Maps API, when it's used, when the JavaScript file is downloaded and there's a Google Maps code on the page and it gets to that point, it will begin downloading all of the necessary resources for that map, regardless if they are needed or not. And that's because the JavaScript API allows you to manipulate it. Oftentimes you're using inline JavaScript, or it's some kind of plugin, or your theme asked you for the API key in the first place. And sometimes you just want to do something really simple with the Google Map, and that's change the view. And this can all be done through the iframe API. And the advantage of using the iframe is that you're able to lazy load it. However, most of the time what I find from users is nobody uses the Google Map, because why would they? Most websites, from my experience, that use the Google Map, they use it just so that way there's something to look at. When I ask them if anybody ever actually uses it, and you can set up tracking for this, no, nobody uses it. And oftentimes I suggest you could replace it with a still image. So just take a screenshot or create a map image, and then on click, it takes them to the Google Maps listing. That would reduce all of the load. Wouldn't even matter if you lazy loaded it or not, because it would be an image. And the user effectively gets the same experience. They don't care if it's going to be draggable, or they can use the street view on your website. So it's one of those mixed things. If you're going to add a Google map, figure out what kind of map you need. I would say in 9 out of 10 implementations, don't use the default Theat one where it asks for an API key. Just go to Google Maps and embed it. That way you don't have to get the API key. You don't need to sign up for billing. You can just skip all that nonsense and add the iframe. And then you have the benefit of being able to lazy load that iframe using a JavaScript library. If you have to use the JavaScript API, then you're going to have to worry about that performance app. Just make sure that you're deferring the JavaScript from the Google Maps API or JS as you can. And otherwise, just only load the code when it's necessary. Only load it on the pages where the map actually exists. And finally, if you're not sure if you need a map or not, ask yourself, is this going to be used, or am I using it for the sake of it being there? And then if you determine you need it, determine if it's better to just send them to Google Maps by an image that they can click, or if it has to be on site. Most of the time, users don't care either way, in my own personal opinion. But the Google Maps API and the Google Maps iframe, at a bigger note, they do have a real world performance impact. And if you're trying to optimize for Google PageSpeed Insights, particularly the mobile test, you're going to struggle if you use Google Maps. It knocked off 20 points by adding one Google Map. And as we saw in the RE CAPTCHA video, the addition of one third-party service can be a really large impact on your website's performance overall. If you have any questions about it, you can feel free to ask me in the comments below. If you need your website to be optimized, or you need a WordPress maintenance service, you can feel free to go to my website, certainmedia.com. You can email me and I'll get back to you and we can see what we can set up. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.